Good morning and welcome back to Coffee Break. This is the next chapter in HaBBaB, or How a Book Becomes a Book, and today we're going to focus on editing.
I feel like one of the most common misconceptions about editors is that we focus mostly on grammar and punctuation. Like I told someone once that I helped to edit children's books, and he said, well, aren't editors kind of irrelevant? Like they're not really still necessary now that we have spell check and grammar check. Yeah, exactly. That look. If you want an English nerd to throw shade at you, that's a good way to do it.
So hopefully we're going to help you understand what editors actually do and how a book goes from a rough manuscript to the finished product.
Right. So just like there's no one right way to approach the writing process, there's not one specific way to edit a book. And in fact, most editors will change their approach based on the individual project and what it needs and where it's at. But generally speaking, you start with the bigger picture issues and then move on to the more trivial things.
So what would be a big picture issue?
Like plot structure, characterization, those kinds of things. Really, I think the editor's main concern is making sure that the story is as productive as possible. So that involves a lot of weeding out of things that aren't necessary. So, characters that aren't really doing much, dialogue that doesn't move the plot forward, narrative digressions, subplots that dilute the story. Those are the kinds of things that editors are putting on the chopping block there. But really, it's much trickier to edit things that aren't there. And that's one of the most important things that editors do, is that they look for the things in the story that are currently missing. And they say, okay, well, what if we flesh out this part, or what if we add this in? And it's kind of magical how they know. It's just a lot of critical analysis and asking the right questions. But it's definitely a skill that, editors build up over time.
Yeah, I feel like it would be hard for me to see what's not there.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But it's incredibly necessary to find those things because that really helps to enhance a story. Because that's the editor's main job, is to enhance the story. They don't want to compromise it. You never want to intrude on the author's vision. So you have to make sure that you're collaborating with the author and never taking over the project.
Right. You're not a co-author, you're a guide.
Exactly. Yeah. That's a good way of phrasing it.
Another thing that I know that you personally do is fact-checking.
Yes, that's another step that the editor has to take, especially for historical novels. You want to make sure that all of the details are right and everything like that.
And fact-checking is I think there are a lot of things that I wouldn't even think about that need to be checked.
Right, yeah. So for example, when I was editing A Less Than Perfect Piece, this is set in America in 1950. And right at the beginning of the book, she mentions Revlon nail polish, specifically the cherries in the snow shade. And I spent half an hour researching that reference alone because there was this huge debate. Some sources online said it debuted in 1932. Others said it debuted in 1953. And I was like, well, if it's 53, we can't have this in here. So I need to know. So yeah, it's just, those little tiny details that you probably wouldn't think about, but it's an editor's job to really sweat the details and make sure that those things are accurate, because someone will know.
Someone will know. Plus, it just makes the story so much more rich to know that it could have happened.
Right, exactly, yeah.
So I know that editing isn't just checking grammar and punctuation and spelling, but someone has to check that. When does that come into the process?
Right, that's actually usually the last thing that we do, is looking over. I mean, obviously if you notice some things in the middle of the big global edits, you can kind of make a note to yourself. Right. But it's not until the very latest stages that you're really looking through and making sure, okay, does the sentence structure make sense? Do I need a comma here? Should it be a semicolon? Those kinds of things. And each publisher has what they call a house style. And so you really need to know your own publishing house's style, because it could be different than how another person would publish it.
Which will also become your personal style.
Right. So like, when we put an ellipsis in a book, we always have a space in between the dots. But not every house does that. Some just have ... like right after each other. So it's just, it's those little tiny quirks that you're not, that could go either way.
And a lot of them, like I was saying, it becomes your personal style. They become second nature because you're doing it so much. But then there are random things where, how do you look up?
Right. And this is actually what I call the proofreader's Bible. This is the Chicago manual style. This is actually not the latest edition. Yeah, I have the latest edition at my house. This is just one that we keep in the office. But yeah, you can see how big it is. There is not a proofreading question in the English-speaking world that this cannot answer for you. This is the gold standard. So obviously, like I said, every publishing house has their own style, but when in doubt, go with Chicago. That would be my advice.
So once that's all done, everything's checked, then we send files to the printer?
Yes, and that's the best feeling in the world because you're just like, it is out of my hands. Gone. And there's actually like a few things that happen after you send the files to the printer, but we'll make a separate production and promotion episode about that. But once you're pretty much set on all of those little fine-tuning tweaks, the editing's pretty much done. You send it to the author, make sure they're completely fine with it, and then once you both agree, like, this is it, this is what we're going with.
That must be huge.
It's probably like kind of nerve-wracking for authors, because they just like, they might be reluctant to let it go. I'm like, get it off my desk.
Yeah, I was gonna say, are you nervous that like, do you have like that nagging, like, what if I missed something?
No, it's mostly just happy. But if you have any questions about the editing process that we weren't able to answer, leave a comment and we will do our best to explain things. We don't want people thinking that we're just common nerds. I am a common nerd, but I'm a lot more than that too.
Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.